Good evening, everyone. My name is Jody Hammer, and I am the Career Services Specialist for the Global Reentry Program here at NPCA. And tonight we're really excited to have a special guest with us, a guest facilitator for this session. And that is Bethany Leech, who is an RPCV also from Eswatini from 2011 to 2013. She is also the International Programs Coordinator for NPCA, and she works a great deal with Next Step Travel, if you've heard of that program, as well as other international initiatives that she's going to actually articulate upon, one of which is the Community Fund, and she'll be talking about unique ways for evacuees to finish their unfinished business from their service that ended obviously drastically and abruptly, oftentimes much sooner than was supposed to be. So without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Bethany. I do want to say though, before that, I'm sorry that we will be recording this session, and if you have questions, certainly drop them in the chat box and I will be happy to help feed them to Bethany. And we may have a small enough group in the end as well. We may also be able to just have you unmute yourself when you do want to ask a question. So I'm going to turn it over to Bethany and have you go ahead and get us started on this exciting opportunity. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jody. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Looks like we have a kind of small group today, but that's just all right. I'm excited for you to be here. As Jody said, my name is Bethany. I served in Eswatini from 2011 to 2013, and I've been with NPCA since September of last year, so still pretty new. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the program that I'll be talking about today, and then I'll kind of go through the process and the steps for everybody who's interested. Feel free to ask questions kind of throughout, but I do have time at the end where we can just have conversational Q&A time, so you can ask any specific questions that come up. So, and Jody's going to be kind of monitoring the chat box for me too. So if you have a question and you just want to put it in the chat, that'd be great. Okay, so I'm here to talk to you about unfinished business of evacuated RPCVs. Sounds like most of you on the call are evacuated RPCVs. So first off, I just want to say sorry that you had to go through all of that. We know that it was really tough and really hard, and we here at NPCA are really eager to help you through this process as best we can. So when volunteers were evacuated in March, NPCA was able to jump right in, and we started asking evacuees kind of what their needs were. We heard a lot of immediate needs like housing, healthcare, needing to find jobs in order to help transition to being back into the US. But then we also started to hear from volunteers that they were really concerned about the work that they left behind in their countries of service. So specifically, we started to hear that many volunteers who had received funding through Peace Corps grants programs like the Peace Corps Partnership Program or SPA had received funds to implement a project, but when they were evacuated, those funds were taken away, and volunteers had to return any funding they had gotten, and essentially projects were halted, projects were canceled, and volunteers were kind of left feeling like, okay, I just did all this work with my community and here we are with nothing. Thank you, Jody, for going to the next slide there. So NPCA was able to hear this need from evacuated RPCVs, and we knew that we were in the position to be able to jump in and assist in this capacity. So NPCA has something that we call the Community Fund. And it's our grant-making vehicle. And we've been using it to supply small project grants to return Peace Corps volunteers since 2015. It all started as a response to the evacuation of volunteers during the Ebola crisis in West Africa. So we immediately knew that in this global evacuation, we could position the Community Fund to be able to help evacuees this time around. Even though it was on a much larger scale, we knew that we had the mechanism to help. So we opened up our grant application process to evacuated volunteers. Specifically, this is geared towards volunteers who had projects that were already approved through Peace Corps' grant process. So projects that were either in the process of raising funds through PCPP or had been given outright grants through other small grant initiatives through Peace Corps and were in the process of implementing their projects. We also knew that our RPCV community was very eager to support evacuated volunteers in any capacity they wanted. So we decided to launch a crowdfunding platform to help evacuated RPCVs be able to re-raise the funds that they needed to finish out their projects. So next slide, Jody. So this slide here gives a really brief overview of how we designed this program to work. So we essentially have 5 stages: submitting an expression of interest to receive project support, signing a partnered campaign agreement that drafts a crowdfunding campaign, crowdfunding to raise funds to complete the project, and then awarding the grant. NPCA awards this to the volunteer, and then a final report out on the grant. I'm going to go over these 5 stages in depth. So those of you who are on the call, if you are an evacuated RPCV and you find yourself in the same situation where you had a project that was being implemented but was canceled when you were evacuated, this will give you an overview of kind of what it would be like to finish out your project in partnership with NPCA. So next slide, please, Jody. So the first step is submitting an expression of interest. So you can go to our website at www.peacecorpsconnect.org/give. And on this page, if you scroll down to the very bottom, you'll find our expression of interest submission portal. It'll look like that orange section there on the slide. That's exactly what it looks like. So you can go down there. If you click on the expression of interest button, it's going to bring you to a Google form. And this will ask you a bunch of questions about your project. It will also ask you to upload any grant paperwork that you had from Peace Corps. And it'll ask you how much you're looking for, the amount of the grant that you're looking for, as well as kind of the just overview details of the project. So this expression of interest actually comes to me. So I will see it first. I will review it, and then it gets routed through, we have an approval committee that will review the project and then approve it or not approve it to go through our crowdfunding model. This usually takes about a week, so it's pretty quick. Since in theory, Peace Corps has already vetted all of these programs, they've already been approved by Peace Corps. That allows us to be able to approve them quite quickly. We don't have to seek out technical experts to vet the projects and make sure that they are sustainable and meet certain requirements, because Peace Corps has done that for us, thankfully. So we are able to do it quite quickly. So the approval process takes about a week. Okay, next slide, Jody. So once your project has been approved, the next step is to sign a partnered campaign agreement. So I will work with the RPCV to draft this, and it's basically a legal agreement that outlines the terms and the working conditions between NPCA and the RPCV to be able to solicit and award funds through a crowdfunding campaign for the project. So this establishes the dates of the campaign, which is the timeline that we will fundraise, and then it also determines the fundraising goal. So this is signed between NPCA, as well as it's signed by the RPCV. And then we also ask the in-country implementing partner to sign this agreement as well. Since evacuees are no longer in country, we kind of lose that visibility on the ground to be able to oversee the implementation of the project. So we are asking the implementing partner in country or a representative of them to sign this agreement as well. This, if you are working with an organization, this can be a member of the organization. If it's a planning committee in the community, it can be somebody on the planning committee. It can be whoever can take leadership on the ground that the RPCV is in contact with that will oversee the implementation of the project. So it's a 3-way agreement. Sometimes it's a 4-way agreement if we have to have an additional fiscal agent. So if we need to have a 4th person accepting the grant funds, which I will talk a little bit more in depth about later, we may have a 4th person sign this agreement as well. So we work together to draft this agreement, and then it goes out and everybody signs it, and that's really when the formal partnership starts. We set our campaign timelines for about 6 weeks. And that's what these agreements all start as, and then they have the extension. We have the option to extend the campaigns longer if necessary. Next slide, please. So once we've gone through the agreement process and everybody's on the same page and we have all the forms signed, we can start crowdfunding. So NPCA has a crowdfunding platform on our website. We work with the RPCV to design the crowdfunding page. So we'll come up with a title for the project, and the RPCV will be able to provide language around the project explaining it that we'll put on the campaign. As you can see on the slide there's a progress bar, so that is also included, so you can kind of see the progress that you're making in raising funds. So this will live on the NPCA website. So anybody who visits it will be able to click on the campaign and find out more and directly donate via the campaign. The RPCV is also given a direct link to their campaign, which they can share within their networks. And the fundraising campaign is really meant to be a partnership between NPCA and the RPCV. So we really encourage the RPCV to be really active in soliciting people to donate to their campaign. So they can take that link, they can put it on their Facebook, they can share it in an email, they can attach it to their Instagram profile. They can really put that link to their campaign anywhere they want to encourage people to donate. On the other side of it, NPCA will also advertise the project campaign through our networks. So we have e-newsletters that go out every other week. So we will advertise, we showcase projects in the e-newsletters, and as well as we have our affiliate group network. So we can directly contact affiliate groups either in the regional area where the RPC lives in the US or a country of service affiliate group. We can directly contact them and ask them to help support the project as well. We are definitely finding that affiliate groups are really interested in this. A lot of them have responded and have contributed large amounts to these project campaigns, as well as helped the RPCVs advertise their projects within the affiliate group social media channels. All right, next slide, please. So then once the crowdfunding has completed and the fundraising goal has been met, we can close out the campaign. So we deactivate it on our website. It still stays on our website so people can read about the project, but you can no longer donate to it. And then we start the awarding process of the funds. So grants are awarded for projects. Let me back up a sec. So when we award the grant for the project, we send it directly to the implementing partner, which is why the implementing partner signs the agreement. So this is different than any funds or grants that you would have received when you were in Peace Corps. When you're in Peace Corps, you get the grant into your personal bank account, and then you're responsible for withdrawing it and using it to implement the project. In this case, since the Peace Corps volunteer is now back in the United States, we are directly transferring the grants to the implementing partner in country. And we're doing this for audit purposes and tax reporting purposes. If we give a grant directly to a returned Peace Corps volunteer, they're going to have to report it in their taxes. Being a returned Peace Corps volunteer, you have not made a lot of money in the last year, so receiving a couple $1,000 grant is definitely going to impact your taxes. So we don't want to put anybody in that situation, and so we feel more comfortable directly transferring it to the implementing partner. Also, it costs a lot of money to get to send funds internationally. So NPCA does have the mechanisms to send international wire transfers. So we take care of all those fees for you. And you don't have to worry about Western Union, which I know some volunteers are investigating, and that can be frustrating, to say the least. So we get the money to the country for you. To ensure fiscal responsibility, NPCA is paying the project grants out in installments, so we won't give the full grant in one payment. We work with the Returned Peace Corps volunteer to determine the installment schedule, so it's not a set schedule. You get to determine it, and you get to work with the implementing partner and figure out what works best for you. So for example, maybe you have a $3,000 grant. But the implementers maybe it'll work best for them to get $12,000 in the first installment, perhaps to buy building materials. And then maybe the second installment will be $1,000 to pay for labor costs. And then the last installment will be the smallest with $800 to purchase, any furnishings that need to go into the space. So you kind of get to review, your project best, your implementing partner knows your project best. So you guys get to decide what amounts and those look like. We work with the RPCV to monitor and communicate this with the implementing partner. So NPCA's point of contact for the project will be the RPCV, and it'll be the RPCV's responsibility to communicate with the implementing partner around when payments are going to be installment payments are going to be made, and then also reporting back to NPCA that the grant installment was used the way it was intended to be used, and then we can release the next installment. I see in the chat that somebody's asking how you apply for
I was just going to ask you that. Yes, the question that they missed the beginning, but how do you go about applying for? And you actually haven't missed that yet, Andrew, right? You're going to be talking about how you go about in the application process a little more, or, I mean, you mentioned it, but was there something additional that you're going to comment on perhaps?
Nope, we have gone over it. I can go back to that slide at the end, but there is an expression of interest submission button on our website. So we are asking people to first submit an expression of interest, which is basically like your application. And you can find that at www.peacecorpsconnect.org/give. We can go over that again in the end, but there's a quick overview.
And Andrew, there will be a recording of this that is made available on the Global Reentry playlist as well. So on the YouTube channel for NPCA, so you'll be able to watch it there too.
So the last step in the process will be the final reporting. NPCA does ask volunteers to submit a final report of their project. We do have a template that we provide you. It's mostly narrative, and it's really to kind of collect the impact of the project in your community. And we ask for this 30 days after the project has been finished. And we don't require as extensive fiscal reporting as Peace Corps grants. We do ask you to submit a final budget that outlines how the grant was used, and to acknowledge any difference from the original budget. We know that COVID-19 has drastically changed a lot of things in how projects are getting implemented. It's changed prices of things, it's changed timelines, and we understand that. So we don't need receipts to be provided, but we do require a budget that explains how the money was used. And then we use the final report to kind of report back out to our community and to our donors about the project. So we probably will highlight that on our website, in our communications, on our blog, just so that our community knows of the great work that we're doing, and knows how their donations have gone to help continue the legacy of Peace Corps. All right, next slide, Jody. All right, so I do have some frequently asked questions here. Hang on, I'm just getting up my notes real quick.
While you're actually pulling that up, Bethany, there was a part 2 from Andrew, a question on, can we apply if we intend to go back to our country of service and help to implement the project through the grant once we're there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We would have to have a conversation to kind of talk about more of what that timeline looks like. NPCA cannot raise funds to cover your travel costs. So if that's what you were thinking, we can't really go down that route. However, if your intention is to get yourself back to country and be there to implement the project, that's okay too. We would just have to have a more in-depth conversation of what your timeline looked like, so that we would know what kind of timeline we were working with.
And Bethany, thank you for that. And there is one other question from Alice, who's asking, is this type of grant one that a Peace Corps volunteer can also apply for while in country?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, so this was adapted originally from our mechanism of how we supported Peace Corps volunteers when they were in service. So previously we were kind of providing grants to volunteers when they were in service, and it was mostly for like the last part of their grant. So if they were fundraising through Peace Corps Partnership Program, let's say they just needed 15% more to meet their fundraising goal, NPCA oftentimes came in and provided that last portion of their fundraising goal to be able to top off the project. If Peace Corps does get back into country and you know, their project grant program gets back up and running again, I imagine NPCA will step in that capacity again.
Great. That's all from the chat box right now.
Great. Okay, so one frequently asked question I get is, you know, why should people crowdfund with NPCA and not through another mechanism like GoFundMe or Facebook Fundraiser or something like that? So if you crowdfund your project through NPCA, first off, you have the support network of 240,000 returned Peace Corps volunteers who we have direct access to. And this includes former Peace Corps staff, friends and family of Peace Corps volunteers, and they all are there to leverage and support your project. We also have the administrative support of the NPCA staff, myself included, who will work with you every step of the way. It's actually me. I work with you every step of the way. So I have phone calls with you. I have email conversations with you. It's kind of an open door policy, so you're able to reach out to me every step of the process, and I answer questions. We troubleshoot any issues we may come up against, and we really work in partnership to make this a success. We also have, like I was mentioning before, the administrative support to be able to do international wire transfers and things like that. And so you don't have to worry about any of those processes. Let me see, did I cover it all? Yeah, so that in a nutshell is why we are encouraging people to fundraise through us rather than through GoFundMe. I mean, GoFundMe is great, but if you do it through NPCA, you're not necessarily doing it alone. You're doing it with a group of people who have been there, they understand your project, they understand your relationship with your community, and we really do want to see you succeed in this. So we have your back in that way. Another frequently asked question I get is there an administration fee? You know, other platforms have an administration fee, and it's true, NPCA does as well. However, ours is a really good deal. So we take, we're a small nonprofit, so that's why we have one, is because, you know, we don't have a lot of funding coming in. We're not a corporation, so we don't have a lot of room for profit there. So we take a 15% fee. Typically how we do this is we take it off of each individual donation that comes into the community fund to cover our administration costs. However, with the crowdfunding model, we're doing it different. Instead of taking 15% off of each donation, we add 15% onto your total grant amount. And we fundraise for that. So we know that every single dollar is important to your project, and we want to make sure that you get all the dollars that you ask for. And so we don't want to take the admin fee from that. We'd rather just raise a little bit more money to cover the admin costs. So for example, if you are requesting a $1,500 grant, 15% of $1,500 is $225. So our fundraising goal then would be $1,725 instead of $1,500. So we just ask our community for a little bit more money to cover those costs. And then the admin fees, they actually get used directly for your project. So the admin fees are what's covering the international wire transfer funds. They're covering my personnel time, and they're covering, you know, the fees we pay for our website and the platform to be able to support it. And then any extra dollars, if there is some, go straight back into programming that supports Return Peace Corps volunteers. So all the money that you raise, you know, directly and indirectly goes to support you as a Return Peace Corps volunteer. So then another question I get is, where do grant funds come from? So as I've mentioned here, we're taking a crowdfunding approach. So the funds that are solicited through the crowdfunding campaigns and our community fund are supported by generous donations from individuals, from groups, I had mentioned affiliate groups, and from organizational members of our Peace Corps community. And so most of the funds for the crowdfunding campaigns are done online. So they're donated through our online portals. Sometimes they come in via checks if they're from organizations or things like that. But they're mostly coming from our communities. We're not soliciting from any, we're not getting any grants that support these projects. So it's really a community-based initiative. I know individual RPCVs who we're crowdfunding for have reached out to organizations and have been provided grants that they then send to us. So it's kind of, they're coming from all over, but typically they're individual donations or they're donations from affiliate groups, or they're donations from organizations that are providing grants directly to the project. And then the last frequently asked question I get is, what if I don't reach my fundraising goal? So we have a few options if you don't reach your fundraising goal. I had mentioned that we set the crowdfunding timeline for 6 weeks initially. So if you get to the end of that 6 weeks and you don't meet your fundraising goal, one of the options we have is, if we feel like we are totally tapped out and we don't know where to solicit funds from anymore, both on your private networks and then on the NPCA networks, we can always close out the project at a smaller grant amount and just pay out a smaller grant. That's obviously not the route we want to go, but we do have that option. Another option is we can extend the timeline, the fundraising timeline. So if you are expecting donations to come in later down the road, or if we know that there are people and groups that we can still reach out to ask for support and ask for contributions, we can extend the timeline and continue to fundraise. We've done this several times and we've been really successful, and we've reached the fundraising goals just by adding a few more weeks to the fundraising timelines. And then the third option, which we've also done successfully, is that NPCA does have a pot of restricted funds that we can use, and at the discretion of the advisory committee, which is made up of our board members, they can decide to contribute the last bit of remaining funds to close out a project campaign. So this is typically being done if fundraising has reached 75% of the fundraising goal. NPCA has stepped in and said, yes, we'll pay that last 25% or what any percentage less than that that is needed to provide the full grant amount. So we've also done this. And it's been successful. And so those are kind of our three options if we don't meet a fundraising goal.
Great. Bethany, there are a lot of questions that have come in, which is great. Keep them coming. I'm going to go through the list here. One question is from Andrew asking a return to service related question again. Is it wise to wait to apply for the grant until we know we can or will return to service?
That's a very good question, and I probably don't have a great answer for you because we're also kind of waiting to hear what Peace Corps does.
That's the magic question.
It is a magic question. It's definitely something, if you're interested in working with NPCA, you can submit your application. That doesn't necessarily mean we have to go through the full process as of yet, but it would get you on our radar. And it's something that we could frequently touch base on and say, okay, how are we feeling now? Do we want to move forward with NPCA? Or would you rather, do you have more information about returning to country and being able to facilitate the project there? There is that fine line of, we don't know how Peace Corps is going to react if, you go back to country, if you're going to be able to jump back in and receive grant funding that you had already previously been awarded. NPCA doesn't know that. And so we don't know how to predict if you receive funding from NPCA, if you go back into Peace Corps service, how that funding would translate over into being able to be used if you're now a Peace Corps volunteer again. So there's kind of a lot of unknowns there, but we can definitely kind of keep in communication, and as we find out more information, we can decide which direction to go. So.
To go along with that, Andrew also asked, can two volunteers apply for a grant on the same grant for one project? A fellow RPCV and I are working on a secondary project for a nonprofit, and he's wondering if grants apply to NGOs for which third-year volunteers were placed?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We are starting to get a lot of applications from Peace Corps volunteers who are working with organizations that weren't necessarily in their primary project or sector. And that's a little bit of a different process. If those projects were not already approved by Peace Corps, there's a longer vetting process that NPCA has to go through in order to evaluate the project proposal. In those situations, we do seek external help from members of our community who have technical expertise in whatever the sector is. So if it's a water project, we reach out to water experts to be able to review the project proposals because we do need a way to vet them if Peace Corps hasn't already approved the project. So then this gets us into a back and forth process of reviewing the project proposal and strengthening it in ways where our advisory committee then feels comfortable with moving ahead to go through the crowdfunding grant process. So yes, we can definitely accept applications for projects that are with organizations outside of your main project scope. It's just a little bit more complex process than the one that I described and walked you through here today.
Great, and let's see, we have another question in the queue, and please keep them coming. These are great questions. Will is asking, he says, it looks like TCP Global may also provide an opportunity to carry out unfinished projects in our countries of service. Do you have any insight on how that might look compared to this crowdfunding mechanism with NPCA. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And TCP Global is actually going to be doing a webinar through the Global Reentry platform later this month. So I encourage any of you who are interested in TCP Global to look for that. I think it's on the 23rd, July 23rd, maybe.
Go to our events calendar, which is peacecorpsconnect.org/events, and you'll see it listed.
Yeah. So TCP Global is a microloan organization, and it's founded and run by RPCVs. So they work with RPCVs. They were working with Peace Corps volunteers. They're now working with RPCVs to be able to establish microloan programs with organizations in their country of service. So if you do have an organization that's looking for some financial support, TCP Global is an excellent resource for that. I am not equipped enough to walk through what that process looks like. So that I definitely encourage you to join that webinar to find out more. But it's more of a micro loan approach rather than a grant.
Great. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, folks in the audience here, I think I've gotten all the questions. If I haven't, just copy and paste yours to the bottom and we'll be sure to ask it. Yeah, so we can, do you want to move forward to the next slide, or are we?
Yep, next slide was just Q&A.
Okay. And it's the official Q&A time now. So once again, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. Alternatively, we have a small enough crowd that, you know, we certainly can have you choose to, if you'd like to ask it, you could unmute yourself and ask.
I also want to comment, I don't know if there's anybody here who is representing an affiliate group who's not an evacuated RPCV. Feel free to ask me questions.
Great.
If you want to be, or you know, if your affiliate group wants to get involved.
That's great. I love that you were indicating that the affiliate groups have really, you know, jumped on this as well, and it's a really great way for them to help, because they raise a lot of money and they have a lot of people, members, who want to help, and being able to contribute to these kinds of crowdsourcing campaigns is phenomenal. All right, Andrew, you just keep thinking. Andrew shared, I'm sure I have more questions. My brain's thinking.
Yeah.
Quick question for you, Bethany.
Go ahead.
Just so if we jump into submitting our expression of interest, and then you mentioned that we'll need to upload documents that were related to our project. So myself, for example, you know, went through the normal route. This was for a WGDP project, but it was through, you know, small grants. And I'm just trying to think about whether I have that stored on my computer, or that's partially my program manager. I know she would have that information too. So I'm wondering what detailed of documents would you like about the project, or are we putting together new information? That's my question for you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. If you have access to those documents, feel free to just upload those. You don't need to recreate anything. Some people have been submitting the entire Excel working document, you know, that has all the tabs and it gives all the detail about community contribution, budget, impact, all of that. You can submit that. Other people have just submitted the PDF where it's more concise. The concise version of this. I think it's kind of the same thing, but it's just a little bit more condensed. You can submit either of those. We're just looking for kind of evidence that you went through this process with Peace Corps, and that, you know, this project has been vetted in some ways. And so that's why we ask for those. We don't go back to Peace Corps and ask for confirmation. And it helps our advisory committee get a little better sense of the project and the thought process that went into developing it, which is really important to them. If they don't have that, then they're going to come back with questions and ask those. They're going to ask, you know, how were these decisions made and how this project was designed.
Thank you.
And I think I think the expression of interest portal only allows you to upload one document. So you can just pick whichever one. If you have additional, you can follow up with an email. You can either send it, I think it's the communityfund@peacecorpsconnect.org is the email that it gives. That goes directly to me, or you can just directly contact me and let me know that you submitted it and these are supporting documents. And the interest isn't, you know, it really just is an expression of interest. If you are just curious about submitting your project and finding out more information, you know, you can simply do that, and then we can just have a chat about it. And it doesn't necessarily mean we have to get into the entire process. I know that each situation with each RPCV, it's a little bit different. You know, the way you were evacuated was all a little bit different. The stages that you were at with your projects is all a little bit different. So it really is individual conversations that I'm having with each person who submits an expression of interest to figure out exactly where we're at and how do we move forward.
All right, and in the chat box we have, Andrew, you had another question. If you are open to it, you certainly, I can either read it for you, or if you'd like to, you can certainly unmute yourself and describe your question directly to Bethany. I'm happy to. Okay, I'm happy to read for you, no problem. So Andrew is asking, he's saying, I had a project underway with an organization, but it never went to fruition. It was stopped before any funds were released. So can I apply for a grant to try to move forward with this project? That's, I think, the first question part, if you can answer that, and then we'll get to the other.
Yeah, so that's, I have a question for you as well. So you said it stopped before any funds were released. Does that mean that it had gone through Peace Corps and been approved and you were in the process of raising funds, or that you had been awarded a grant but they just weren't released yet? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Hey, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, no, it was through Courts for Kids and it was approved by them. So we were in the process of getting all the, I guess, organizational aspects of the grant together, but they never released any payments because it stopped because of COVID.
Sure. So yeah, this would fall into the category that I was trying to explain earlier. So since this wasn't approved by Peace Corps, we would have to put it through an approval vetting process through our advisory committee. And so yeah, you're definitely welcome to submit an expression of interest. I would upload any documentation that you have that outlines specifics of the project, so budget, things like that. And then the advisory committee will review it and they'll advise me and how to, you know, what their decision is, if they need more information from you. And then we'll work together to figure out if that is, you know, a project that they do want to support. But yeah, if they approve it, then we absolutely can move forward. It would probably still go through the crowdfunding model. So we would put it up for crowdfunding. But yes, we are open to those.
Let's see, are there any other questions coming in? I don't see any that have come in since. If you do, please feel free to put them in the chat box or unmute yourself to ask the question. And I want to ask, actually, if they want more information, what's the best email to pursue? And I can drop that in the chat box if you'd like.
Yeah, you can reach out to me directly. So I'm Bethany at Peace Corps.
Are you putting it in? Okay, I think you're putting it in yourself. Great. That's fine.
At peacecorpsconnect.org. I'm making sure I spell it right.
Bethany at peacecorpsconnect.org.
Yes.
Bethany's your woman for all things crowdsourcing and the community fund related. Thank you, Bethany. Great. Any other final questions before we wrap it up here?
Yeah, and feel free to share these with your, Peace Corps cohorts. We're, still accepting expression of interest, on a rolling basis. So anybody is encouraged to apply.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much. And we really appreciate you taking time to do this webinar with us to really raise awareness. And thank you for those of you who have tuned in. And again, this will be eventually available within the next couple days on the Global Reentry playlist within NPCA's YouTube channel. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here. Thanks everyone for joining us and have a great night.
Thanks everyone.